A lot of people say that it was a whitewash, that the Board of Inquiry had already predetermined the cause of death.
But does it not strike you as a coincidence that someone coming to give evidence should happen to die in very unfortunate circumstances?
Not if he was very drunk.
There are good grounds to suspect Addis was murdered.
I think I was just looking for an explanation and I just couldn't find one.
"38 years ago, Marine Addis went to the Falklands, but never came back. To this day, no one knows what happened to him."
Scene here with Richard Asprey.
Good evening and welcome to the programme. Tonight, marine mystery. Falklands forensic investigation fails to find body.
Detectives from the UK came down to bolster the inquiry and arrested 4 men from the settlement, but there wasn't enough evidence to charge them.
There was 4 people who came under suspicion at one time. They were questioned, and eventually, they were released without charge, each one of them. And there's no more evidence to incriminate them than there is to incriminate anybody else who was in the club at the time or with Alan Addis at the time. So no, at the moment, there's really no major suspects.
Why were they arrested?
Well, they were arrested because a lot of the rumours circulated around those 4 people. And essentially what happened then was that we had actually sought assistance from the Devon and Cornwall Police to come down and assist with the investigation and to look into the rumours. Now, when the arrests were made, the 4 people were interrogated. They were questioned by the interrogated, sounds a bit heavy, but they were questioned by the Devon and Cornwall Police, and essentially they came to us and said that these men know nothing. They can't be involved in anything. There's no suspicion around them at this time. And so we accepted that, and that was why the men were released.
Do you believe that?
Well, what I believe is a totally different thing. But having said that, I can't say that I have personally found anything that indicates that any one person was involved in the disappearance of Alan Addis.
So therefore they'd focused the whole board.
I was the local police intelligence officer, and I had a look into the file at the same time as we went over to computer records. And as we started inputting stuff into the computers, we realised there was a lot of stuff that had to be cleared, which couldn't be cleared by a small police force like ours. We probably needed a little bit more professional assistance from the UK. The Falkland Islands is not a crime place. You know, people don't really commit heavy crimes there, like disappearing someone. And so it was something that just hung around, and it was something that we felt had to be looked into. We spoke to the Home Office team, which was led by Professor John Hunter, and they're a very professional outfit. And they worked hand in glove with the FBI in the United States, and the FBI had actually uncovered many bodies that had actually disappeared over the years, and brought them to a conclusion. And so we thought maybe this was an answer.
At the time, I thought this is a challenge, and it's an opportunity to get to the Falklands, and it's an opportunity to provide closure to the boy's mother. What we do is go to specific locations, selected places, and knock them off one by one, eliminate them one by one. And if there is a victim in one of these places, we'll find them. What we did was identify places where Addis had been, where he'd been seen, use the police information, and then looking at particular places on the ground to see if we could use our techniques to try and find the body. My speciality was in using archaeological techniques, reconnaissance, remote sensing, and actual physical archaeology.
I had the kind of a detection dog. It really was one of those whodunits, really. Everybody had their own opinion as to what had happened to Alan. Even the actual facts of what occurred on the night varied. So it was very important to try and determine what actually happened while he was alive, where was he at what time and what was he doing, so we could move on from there. With all due respect to the Falkland Island Police, they didn't have the same experience as we had, but they were very, very determined to try and find Alan's body. They wanted for this case to be solved, but of course the problem was that they relied on us to try and put forward scenarios or tactics that they hadn't used before.
Just go and have a look.
There was a lot of pressure on us out there to deliver. We were, in some respects, the knights in shining armour that would come from the UK to solve the problem. And I think that put pressure on us as a team. So we would try to play it very low key.
I felt uncomfortable at the time. I think if you think about it, if you have a small community of, 50 or 60 folk there, and all of a sudden, over the hill comes a series of Land Rovers containing half a dozen policemen and some experts, so-called, from the UK, you know, you're not made to feel particularly comfortable. And I don't think they were over-supportive. I don't think they were under-supportive. They just said what they needed to say until we went away again.
There was definitely three camps. There's the people who were involved with whatever happened, there was the people who knew what happened but were afraid to say, and there was the people who didn't know and wanted this to be solved for the sake of the community.
Once you'd actually got somewhere with a community, you felt terribly isolated, and you're just surrounded by literally hundreds, thousands of acres of nothingness just stretching off into the unknown. I don't think he died of his own volition, if you like. I don't think he fell into the sea. I don't think he wandered off drunk, otherwise there would have been evidence of that. I think foul play was involved somewhere down the line. Everyone was very, very drunk that night. I think he was a bit of a ladies' man, and it may be that he got into a fight over a woman, and the fight went maybe a bit too far, trying to teach him a lesson before he went off the next day. And they found they had her body on their hands. Not knowing what to do, community closed ranks, stashed him overnight and moved him out in the morning into the wilderness that's out there, and his body was never found. One of the police officers at the time said, you know, looking for someone in the Falklands isn't necessarily like looking for someone who's gone missing in the UK because of the nature of the landscape. Because in the UK, the chances are people aren't buried or disposed of randomly. In the Falklands, I suspect that may have been the case, that they did stash him overnight. They did take him out into the wilderness, but instead of taking him to a place which was very specific and which you could access again through landmarks or landscape features or whatever, it was a place where there weren't any. And I think that might have been a mistake.
It was very, very difficult. I mean, there was the scenario that he was fed to the pigs. Yes, the pigsty was there. We know that it could have happened. There was no evidence to say that it did happen, but it could have happened. There was the story that he just got drunk and fell into the sea trying to board the boat. There was no evidence to say that's what happened, but it could have happened. And there was the other story that he wandered over trying to pick his ship up again because he was late, and he wandered off into the wilderness in the middle of winter and died of exposure again. All three scenarios are very, very plausible, but there was no evidence to say that any one of them was what actually happened.
If something had happened, people would have known about it. It would have become common knowledge in a short time. I mean, the camp people would have been able to see things like buzzards flying around if someone had gone down in the camp. But there was no indications anywhere of anything like that. And so it was just a case of that he had been in the club, he had left the club, although nobody could actually pinpoint when he left the club, and then from that point on he disappeared.
Everybody knows everybody else. In fact, they probably know what you're going to do before you do it. You know, very close relationships, friendships, and it happens all the time in the Falklands. Rumours are rife, you know, because you know everybody.
There is a prime suspect. He may have had assistance. I don't think you'll even get a deathbed confession from that prime suspect, which is a shame. But perhaps as technology goes on, things might change. I think they've got a few ideas of where his remains might be. His watch was never found, so that's always, you know, if it's with him, that's a clue. So,
do you think the community have colluded in any way to keep the name of the person who is responsible for this safe?
Yeah, I think they had to. I don't think they had any choice.
How do you mean?
Fear.
There would be no need for any cover-up, but really I think the Falkland Islanders and the Marines, everybody wanted to find Addie. And no matter how the powers that be try, or no matter what the powers that be say, somebody somewhere is always going to say, but what if? And we can sit here all day long and say, what if? And we get nowhere. Although all these rumours, suggestions, were all given investigation time, not only by the local police, but police from Great Britain as well. There is, as far as to my knowledge, not one shred of evidence that can be put in one pile or the other. It's absolutely, it still remains an enigma, if you like.
I think it was an act of violence that wasn't meant to come to that conclusion. I think he was just really supposed to be hurt, or certainly taught a pretty good lesson. And I think, as the case with probably most murders, things go too far and people end up getting killed. And there's people out there who know who done it. The bloke who done it knows he done it.
Consider the fact that the Devon and Cornwall team actually covered an awful lot of ground on the rumour side, and they followed the rumours to source where they could, and they bottomed them out. And in fact, most of the rumours, which we felt were quite, you know, good evidence if it was true, would have been brilliant, but turned out not to be true.
There is a general consensus among a lot of people now that Alan Addis died there. It was an accident. He got into a fight that went too far, something like that. Someone decided to give him a duffing over.
Can you imagine just your child's there one day and not the next, and you don't know why?
Alan will come home, and Alan will be put to rest.
Once a Royal Marine, always a Royal Marine. We bring our boys back, and we didn't do this time.